Psychology shows that the brain constantly searches for patterns. It wants certainty. It wants clear answers. When something doesn't make sense, the mind keeps returning to it again and again, trying to solve the mystery. And few mysteries are more frustrating than trying to understand someone who keeps pulling away emotionally. The strange part is that many avoidant people do not fit the image most people have in their heads. They are not always cold. They are not always uncaring. They are not always indifferent. In fact, many of them feel deeply, very deeply. But feelings are not the problem. The problem is what those feelings represent. Because for some people, emotional closeness does not just create comfort. It creates fear. And until you understand that truth, their behavior will continue to feel confusing. You see, most people believe that love naturally brings people closer together, and for many people it does. But for someone with avoidant tendencies, closeness can trigger something unexpected. The closer the connection becomes, the stronger their internal alarm system may become, not because they want to lose you, not because they enjoy distance, but because emotional intimacy can feel unfamiliar, overwhelming, or even dangerous. Imagine carrying invisible walls around your heart for years. Walls built from disappointment, walls built from betrayal, walls built from childhood experiences, walls built from moments when vulnerability felt unsafe. Over time, those walls stop feeling like barriers. They start feeling like protection. They start feeling like survival. And when someone gets close enough to see behind those walls, a deep internal conflict begins. Part of them wants connection. Part of them wants love. Part of them wants to be understood, but another part is terrified of what happens if they let someone all the way in. This creates a painful cycle. They move closer, then they pull away. They open up, then they shut down. They seek connection, then they create distance. And for the person on the receiving end, it feels like emotional whiplash. One moment, everything feels real. The next moment, everything feels uncertain. This is where many people make a mistake. They assume distance means lack of feelings. They assume withdrawal means rejection. They assume silence means indifference. But human psychology is rarely that simple. Sometimes the people who seem the most distant are fighting battles you cannot see. Sometimes the strongest walls hide the deepest fears. And sometimes the person pulling away is struggling with emotions they do not fully understand themselves. Think about that for a moment. How many relationships have suffered because two people were reacting to what they saw on the surface instead of understanding what was happening underneath? One person sees distance and responds with pressure. The other person feels pressure and creates more distance. The cycle continues. Both people become frustrated, both people become hurt, and neither person truly understands what is happening. But there is something important you need to hear right now. Understanding avoidant behavior is not about excusing unhealthy actions. It is not about abandoning your own needs. It is not about chasing someone endlessly. It is about seeing the deeper picture. Because when you understand the hidden forces driving human behavior, everything begins to change. You stop taking every action personally. You stop assuming the worst. You stop fighting battles that were never really about you. And most importantly, you begin to approach connection with wisdom instead of fear. The truth is that every human being wants to feel safe. Every human being wants acceptance. Every human being wants to feel understood. The difference is that people pursue those needs in different ways. Some move toward connection, others move away from it. But underneath those different behaviors often lives the same desire. The desire to be loved without losing themselves. The desire to be accepted without being judged. The desire to be close without being hurt. And this is where our journey begins, because what you are about to discover may completely change the way you view avoidant people, emotional intimacy, and even your own relationships. In this video, you will learn the 5 powerful secrets that help create genuine emotional connection with someone who struggles with closeness. More importantly, you will learn why most people unknowingly push avoidance further away while believing they are doing the exact opposite. By the end, you will understand the hidden psychology behind their actions, the mistakes that destroy connection, and the mindset shifts that can transform confusion into clarity. Because sometimes the heart is not locked. Sometimes it is simply protecting itself. And once you understand the difference, everything changes. Now that the mystery has started to make sense, a new question appears. If someone keeps creating distance, why do so many people believe they simply do not care? The answer is simple. Most people judge behavior without understanding the reason behind it. Human beings naturally focus on what they can see. When someone becomes less responsive, cancels plans, changes their energy, or seems emotionally unavailable, the mind quickly creates a story. That story usually sounds something like this: they lost interest. They don't value me. They don't want this relationship. The problem is that stories created from fear are rarely accurate. The human brain has a survival mechanism that constantly looks for threats. It tries to protect us from emotional pain before pain actually arrives. As a result, we often assume the worst long before we know the truth. This is exactly why so many relationships suffer. People react to assumptions rather than reality. And when it comes to individuals with avoidant patterns, assumptions can be especially damaging. One of the biggest misconceptions is believing that emotional reserve means emotional emptiness. Nothing could be further from the truth. Many avoidant individuals experience powerful emotions. They think deeply. They care deeply. They remember conversations. They notice details. They often feel much more than they reveal, but expressing those feelings can feel uncomfortable. For some, showing emotional needs feels risky. For others, depending on another person creates anxiety. As a result, they learn to manage their emotions privately. They become experts at hiding what is happening inside. From the outside, this can look like indifference. Inside, something completely different may be happening. Think about a person standing in the middle of a storm while trying to appear calm. To everyone else, they seem unaffected. Yet beneath the surface, they are using enormous energy just to stay composed. This is why appearances can be misleading. Many people expect emotions to be visible. They expect affection to be obvious. They expect attachment to look a certain way. When it does not, confusion takes over. But people are shaped by different experiences. What feels natural to one person may feel difficult to another. Someone who grew up feeling emotionally supported often learns that closeness is safe. Someone who grew up learning that emotions lead to disappointment may develop a very different relationship with vulnerability. Neither person consciously chooses these patterns. These responses develop over time. They become automatic, they become familiar, and familiarity is powerful. The human mind tends to repeat what feels familiar even when it creates problems. This is one of the most important psychological truths you can understand. People do not always choose what is healthy. Often, they choose what feels known. Even if that pattern limits connection, even if that pattern creates loneliness, even if that pattern keeps them from experiencing the very thing they want most. This explains why an avoidant person may desire companionship while simultaneously struggling with emotional closeness. These two realities can exist at the same time, and that contradiction confuses many people. They wonder, how can someone want love and still keep their guard up? Because desire and fear can live together. A person can dream of connection while worrying about what connection might require. A person can appreciate another human being while feeling overwhelmed by emotional expectations. A person can value a relationship while still needing distance to regulate their internal world. This does not mean every avoidant individual behaves the same way. Every person has a unique story. Every person carries different experiences. But there is a common thread. Many have learned that relying too heavily on others can lead to discomfort, so they create systems of self-protection. These systems may reduce immediate stress, but they often create long-term challenges. The tragedy is that people around them usually misread these behaviors. Instead of seeing caution, they see rejection. Instead of seeing uncertainty, they see lack of interest. Instead of seeing internal struggle, they see coldness. The misunderstanding grows larger. Communication becomes weaker. Frustration increases. Both sides begin feeling unseen. This is where many relationships start moving in the wrong direction. One person seeks reassurance. The other feels pressured. One person wants more emotional discussion. The other wants less intensity. Without awareness, both individuals become trapped in a cycle neither intended to create. And the longer that cycle continues, the harder it becomes to break. But there is good news. Understanding creates power. The moment you stop viewing every action through the lens of personal rejection, your perspective changes. You begin asking better questions. You become curious instead of reactive. You start looking beneath the surface. That shift alone can transform the entire dynamic. Because genuine understanding is not about labeling someone as good or bad. It is about recognizing what influences their behavior. When you understand the forces shaping another person's actions, you gain something incredibly valuable: clarity. and clarity removes unnecessary suffering. It allows you to respond with wisdom rather than impulse. It allows you to separate facts from fears. It allows you to see the person instead of only seeing the behavior. This is where real growth begins. Not when you try to change someone, not when you force progress, not when you demand immediate answers. Growth begins when you understand the hidden reality behind what you are experiencing. Because once you stop fighting against what you do not understand, you create the possibility for something much deeper. And as you are about to discover, beneath many avoidant behaviors lies a powerful force that drives almost every decision they make. A force so influential that it quietly shapes relationships, communication, trust, and emotional connection without most people ever recognizing it. To unlock the heart, you must first understand that force, and that is exactly where we are going next. At this point, one thing should be becoming clear. What looks confusing on the outside often has a deeper cause underneath. And if there is one force that quietly influences more avoidant behavior than anything else, it is not a lack of affection. It is fear. Not the kind of fear that causes someone to run from danger. Not the kind that appears during a crisis. This fear is much quieter, much harder to notice. Yet it shapes decisions, reactions, and emotional habits every single day. The strange thing about emotional fear is that many people do not even realize they are carrying it. It operates in the background. It becomes part of how they see the world, part of how they interact with others, part of how they protect themselves. For many avoidant individuals, emotional exposure feels similar to standing at the edge of a cliff. Even when the opportunity in front of them is beautiful, a part of their mind focuses on what could go wrong. The possibility of disappointment, the possibility of dependence, the possibility of being hurt, the possibility of losing control. These possibilities become so powerful that self-protection starts feeling more important than connection itself. This is where many people become confused. They assume that someone who withdraws must not care enough, but caring is often what activates the fear in the first place. Think about it. When a relationship feels casual, there is little emotional risk. There is less to lose, less at stake, less vulnerability required. But when a bond begins to matter, everything changes. The emotional investment grows, the importance grows, the potential for pain grows. And for someone who has learned to associate closeness with emotional discomfort, this can activate powerful internal alarms. Suddenly, situations that seem normal to others feel overwhelming. A deeper conversation, a discussion about the future, increased emotional expectations, greater intimacy, all of these experiences can trigger discomfort that is difficult to explain. Not because they are bad, but because they require openness. And openness requires trust. Trust requires risk. Risk requires courage. Many avoidant individuals have spent years developing strategies that help them feel emotionally secure without depending too heavily on anyone else. They become highly self-reliant. They solve problems alone. They process emotions privately. They convince themselves they do not need much from others. Over time, independence becomes part of their identity, part of their strength, part of their survival system. But there is a hidden cost. The more someone relies exclusively on themselves, the harder it can become to allow another person into their inner world. Because true connection requires something many avoidant individuals find challenging. It requires letting another human being matter. And when someone matters, uncertainty enters the picture. No one can completely control another person's actions. No one can guarantee perfect outcomes. No one can eliminate the possibility of emotional pain. This reality creates tension. One part desires closeness, another part seeks protection. The result is an internal struggle that can continue for years. What makes this especially difficult is that emotional fear rarely announces itself directly. People do not usually say, "I am creating distance because I am afraid." Instead, the fear disguises itself. It may appear as a need for excessive personal freedom. It may appear as emotional detachment. It may appear as focusing heavily on work, goals, responsibilities, or distractions. It may appear as finding flaws in relationships that previously seemed promising. The behavior changes, but the underlying purpose remains the same. creating enough distance to reduce emotional discomfort. This is important to understand because many people spend years fighting the wrong battle. They focus entirely on the surface behavior. They argue about communication. They argue about availability. They argue about actions. Meanwhile, the real issue remains untouched. Fear cannot be solved through pressure. Fear cannot be solved through demands. Fear cannot be solved through control. Fear responds differently. Fear responds to emotional security. Fear responds to patience. Fear responds to experiences that gradually prove a relationship is not a threat. Human psychology teaches an important lesson. People move toward environments where they feel safe. They move away from environments that feel overwhelming. This principle affects every area of life. Relationships are no exception. When someone constantly feels judged, criticized, cornered, or emotionally overloaded, their natural instinct is to create distance. Not because they are evil, not because they are heartless, but because their nervous system is trying to protect them. Understanding this changes everything, because it shifts the question. Instead of asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" a better question becomes, "What are they protecting themselves from?" That single shift creates a completely different perspective. It opens the door to compassion. It creates room for insight. It helps you see the hidden struggle rather than only the visible reaction. And here is something even more powerful. Many avoidant individuals are not only protecting themselves from future pain, sometimes they are protecting themselves from emotions they have never fully processed. Old disappointments, old wounds, old experiences that quietly shaped how they view relationships. The past has a way of influencing the present when it remains unresolved. Even years later, even when life appears normal, even when someone seems strong on the outside, unhealed experiences often leave invisible fingerprints on future connections. This is why emotional patterns can feel so difficult to change. The behavior is not simply about the current relationship. It is connected to deeper beliefs developed over time. Beliefs about trust, beliefs about dependence, beliefs about vulnerability, beliefs about what happens when someone gets too close. And until those beliefs are challenged, the same patterns often repeat themselves. But here is the encouraging truth. Human beings are not prisoners of their past. Awareness creates possibility. Understanding creates growth. And every meaningful transformation begins with recognizing what is truly happening beneath the surface. Because once fear is identified, it loses some of its power. Once hidden patterns become visible, change becomes possible, and this leads directly to the first major secret that unlocks deeper connection. A principle so important that without it, almost every attempt to get closer will create the opposite result. A principle that has the power to lower defenses, reduce emotional tension, and create the foundation for genuine trust. That principle is not pursuit, it is safety, and that changes everything.